The May 20th, 2024 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Chardy. Here. Mr. Chardy is present. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz is present. Chairman Frazier.
Present.
Chairman Frazier is present. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman is present. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe is present.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
No, there is not.
Is there anyone present who is not signed up to speak but who would like to address the committee at this time? If none, that concludes the public forum. Pat Gooch, Senior Planner for Monroe County's Planning and Development Department, will now give a brief overview of the 2025-2030 Capital Improvement Program as it pertains to the Planning and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Chairperson Frazier. You should all have a copy of the County Executive's recommended 2025-2030 CIP. The process for pulling together the CIP is largely the same every year. In fall, departments are asked to propose projects for the CIP according to guidelines established by the CIP Review Committee. Guidelines include consistency with last year's program and adding new projects in the latter years of the program unless clearly justified. Throughout the fall, the CIP reviews the proposed projects and makes changes based on project priority and fiscal constraints on the program. In December, the committee presents a recommended CIP to the County Executive. The County Executive's comments are incorporated into the CIP, and after the first of the year, he submits his recommended CIP to the County Planning Board. During the winter, the Monroe County Planning Board reviews the CIP, holds a public information meeting, sets priorities for the capital budget year, which is the first year of the CIP, 2025, and submits its recommended CIP to the County Executive. The County Executive takes the opportunity to make further revisions if needed, and then submits the recommended CIP to your honorable body in May. In June, you will set a public hearing for the July legislature meeting. At the same July meeting, you will consider and review, and upon your favorable review, vote to adopt the plan. The capital budget 2025 year is presented with the operating budget and is adopted in December, when bond resolutions are passed for the projects included in 2025 in the adopted CIP. The 6-year program is summarized in Table 1 on pages 4 to 5 of the CIP. Let's look at the program in terms of funding sources, budget year funding, and new projects. Recommended total program funding is just under $590 million for 13 departments of Monroe County. Total county funding, which includes Monroe Community Hospital, Airport, Pure Waters, and Soil Water, excludes all but those departments, is just over $276 million in the recommended CIP, which is approximately 47% of the total. There are two kinds of county funding, bonding and county cash. Projects that use county cash are paid for out of operating funds and do not affect the county's debt. Projects that require bonding contribute to the county's debt. Debt estimates are visualized in Chart 2 on page 3. Total district funding is used by the Pure Waters program and accounts for almost 34% of total CIP funding. There are two kinds of district funding, bonding and district cash. Projects that use district cash are paid for out of operating funds and do not impact Pure Waters' debt. Monroe County Waters is also district funded. Enterprise funding, or user fees, are from the hospital, airport, and solid waste. They account for over 6% of total CIP funding. There are two kinds of enterprise funding, bonding and cash. Projects that use cash are paid for out of operating funds. State and federal funding is used at MCC, airport, facilities, traffic engineering, highways and bridges, and sheriff's programs. Together, state and federal funding account for just under 13% of the total CIP. There is approximately $81,000 of private funding in this year's CIP related to a DOT project, Weiler Road Bridge over West Creek. This is private funding coming from the town of Hamlin related to the project. Table 2 on pages 4 and 5 of your CIP lists 76 capital budget projects in priority order as determined by the Monroe County Planning Board. These amount to approximately $90 million in total funding. Now I'll highlight a few departments with new projects in the CIP. One thing you'll note is that departments come and go through the CIP program. Two departments that join the 2025-2030 CIP program are the County Clerk's Office, page 8, and the Board of Elections, page 13, each of which have a new project starting in 2025. Both of these projects focus on upgrading how we maintain records accurately and with digital technology. The Clerk's Office is digitizing some of its oldest records to preserve them and more easily search them when needed. The Board of Elections is planning to update the electronic poll book systems in line with best practices for electronic voting. Monroe Community Hospital's funding plan, which begins on page 17, contains 8 projects, one of which is new, Friendship Place. The Monroe Community Hospital program accounts for less than 3% of the total capital program. Moving on to the Department of Environmental Services, the Pure Waters program begins on page 41. 6 new projects are introduced to the CIP, one of which, Northwest Quadrant Pure Waters District Upgrades, is slotted for 2025 and 2026. The remaining 5 are scheduled for 2030. Pure Waters projects are funded solely through district funds. The Pure Waters program accounts for just under 34% of the total capital program this year. The Facilities Management program begins on page 52 of your CIP. There are 3 new projects related to improvements to county facilities in the CIP. The County Facilities program accounts for just under 13% of the total capital program. The 6-year program for county funding of the Parks Department begins on page 61. There are 14 parks projects in the CIP. 2 of these projects are new and include drainage improvements at Duran Eastman and Webster Park improvements. The park program accounts for just over 2% of the recommended capital program. The Department of Transportation Highways and Bridges program begins on page 71 of the CIP and includes 4 projects, 3 of which are bridge-related. The Walker Road Bridge and Weiler Road Bridge are moving to the 2025 capital budget year as they are receiving 95% federal funding. The Traffic Engineering program, page 85, has a new traffic signal project with the same funding structure. The DOT program accounts for 17% of the total capital program. The Sheriff's program begins on page 96. There are 9 projects in the Sheriff's program. 1 new project is introduced in 2025, the Sheriff's Body-Worn Camera Project, which is nearly 60% funded by New York State. The Sheriff's program accounts for just over 5% of the total capital program. I will be happy to take questions when the committee gets to this item on its agenda. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gooch. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the April 30th, 2024 minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next item on the agenda is new business. Madam Clerk.
Referral 24-0162, 2024 Annual Action Plan for Housing and Community Development in Suburban Monroe County and grant submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Moved by Legislator Cruz and seconded by Legislator Asman. Is there any discussion?
It appears to be a decrease of roughly $384,000 from the previous year. Can you just explain why the decrease and who creates the submission?
Through the chair, HUD releases the allocations that we receive based on a formula from the federal budget. And the action plan is created by our division for development.
Through the chair, so we asked for the same amount, or is it they calculate it on their own?
The chair, HUD calculates that formula for all entitlement communities.
And through the chair, what's the reason for the decrease this year as opposed to last year?
Through the chair, I do not have that information. That is a budget that comes down from the overall federal budget that comes down to our entitlement, our HUD Buffalo field office, and they calculate that based on what the allocation that they receive.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll yield.
Is there any other discussion? Legislator McCabe?
Sure. Well, I know these projects are listed in the 2024 Annual Action Plan. Copy of such.
Yes, I believe that was submitted.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that's the additional material that's on file with the clerk's office, but we can get you additional copies of that.
One follow-up question.
Legislator, can you just use the mic, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Frank's doesn't let me talk. Are there any towns and villages that don't participate in this community development consortium?
Through the chair, Greece and Aranaquoit received direct funding from HUD for CDBG, so they are not part of our CDBG consortium, but they are part of our home consortium.
Can you elaborate a little bit further on that through the chair?
Greece and Aranaquoit meet a certain, I'm sorry, through the chair, Greece and Aranaquoit meet a certain percentage of low-mod beneficiaries, so they are eligible to receive direct funding from HUD.
Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I have one question. For the home program, do you have an approximate number of how many people are served by that?
Chair, can you be more specific as far as which home program?
Just overall, how many families are served? Is it a couple hundred, less than 100?
Through the chair, each program is different. We fund 5 different programs through the home funding. Overall, it varies. For home improvement, we serve approximately 70 homeowners through the home improvement program. First-time home buyers, it varies depending on the number of houses that are purchased. And for affordable housing, that is also dependent on the types of affordable housing projects we receive each year, and that varies. Through acquisition rehab, it is also dependent on how many properties we can acquire each year that are sold to income-eligible first-time home buyers. And I'm forgetting, I think that may be it as far as the home-funded projects. There are, yes, there are estimates as far as the number of beneficiaries that would be served each year through the home funding.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Legislator McCabe?
As a follow-up to Chairman Frazier's question through Chairman Frazier to the administration, can you provide us with the actual numbers of the beneficiaries in these programs?
There are estimates that are in the annual action plan. We do a report at the end of the program year, which is posted online for what we accomplish each year.
Okay, so I can find last year's results online.
Yes.
I yield.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 24-0163, Adopt 2025-2030 Capital Improvement Program.
Moved by Legislator Cruz, seconded by Legislator Hasman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? There being no other matters, the May 2024 meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee will be held on Monday, June 24th, 2024 at 5:40.